like to invite up my fantastic panelist, Julian from Google, and Hans Peter as a serial entrepreneur. Come on up here. Round of applause for these guys. Are we awake? Let's go. Choose your favorite seat. What do you got back there? What are you doing? You're causing trouble. You brought more jewelry. We're going to talk about why I called jewelry in a second. Oh. I'll deal with that later. Hi, guys. Oh, you haven't met yet. So why don't we do the intros really quickly? 2 minutes from each of you. What the hell are you doing? And what do you love about photography?
Hi, I'm Julian Green. I have been living in San Francisco since 1998 at the rock face of technology.
The rock face?
The rock face. 4 startups, 6 years at eBay. My startups selling books online in 98, selling bulldozers online. From 2000, I think I auctioned the first bulldozer on the internet, which was... They said it couldn't be done, but it could
You did
be
it.
done.
It's a classic entrepreneur story.
6 years at eBay, helping sellers sell on the platform, and then scalping tickets, an important contribution to society. Then started a company called House, which is a home design inspiration website, and iPhone, iPad, Android apps. And then started Jetpack for travel inspiration. Jetpack got bought by Google, and now I'm at Google, and I'm the product manager for the mobile vision products. So putting all the computer vision technology onto phones and drones and robots and satellites.
Hans Peter Brondomo. I am, as you introduced me, a serial entrepreneur, currently mostly skiing. I'm on sabbatical.
That's entrepreneurial, isn't it? I know how to do that, too.
It can be quite entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of...
Depends on the jumps. And
especially with the snow conditions.
Depends on what kind of cameras you're wearing.
But I started in the imaging, I've been a photographer sort of in your camp since I was a kid, and started in the imaging space based on research I was doing at the Media Lab. Started a company in 1990 called Diva. Stood for Digital Video Applications, and we sold it to Avid Technology in '93. And it was very early on. Somebody was talking about, I think one of your earlier colleagues here was talking about video starting in 1998. We were doing digital video back in 1990. I'm dating myself here. And sort of been tracking that space and done several other companies since then. But imaging, storytelling, more importantly, has really been sort of a core thread through my path to where I am today. And I sold my last company in 2009 to Nokia. Stayed there for a while. Worked on some very exciting stuff in the imaging space that I can't talk about. And left about 6 months ago.
Well, we'll try to get some wisdom out that relates to it, potentially. But thank you very much, guys. Can we get the graphic recorder screen up here? Just so you can actually have a very meta experience listening to us and watching people design about us. So, guys, tell me, what cameras did you guys use, or video or imaging, photo, cameras did you guys use 15 years ago? What was your go-to camera 15 years ago, and what's your go-to camera now? And why?
Well, I'll start. I think the answer is very simple. It depends.
Okay.
I think, there's the classic hierarchy of why, what, and how. And I think the first question I always ask myself is, like, why do I need a camera? And then, what camera do I choose? And then how do I use it? And, how am I capturing the story or images I want to capture? And I think, we tend to get caught up in the discussion about, is it the cell phone or is it the DSLR? What is the technology itself? But I think the more important part is to stick with the why. Why are we trying to capture images? Why do we have cameras in the first place? We have cameras to tell stories. And I said, so that's always a starting point for me. So specifically to answer your question, it was analog cameras back 15, 20 years ago.
Which ones?
I had a Contax, that was my favorite. I originally bought cameras on the back of cereal boxes when I was a kid, little Kodak Instamatics. But
and now you're really dating yourself.
Yes, and I think now today it really depends. I mean, I was just on a great trip in the mountains a few weeks ago, and I carried a Leica in my backpack, and I carried an iPhone in my jacket, and the iPhone was the go-to if I quickly needed to get to something.
Mm-hmm.
And if I saw something beautiful and I saw the right light and the right image, I would take my backpack off and reach for the Leica. So it really just had to do with what I saw and what I wanted to create.
Yeah, I grew up on my dad's OM1, which was this beautiful light-ish. By common standards, film camera. 15 years ago, I think just about got the digital Rebel, the Canon, I guess 300D, and again, just sort of a nice light, easy camera. Although that competed with, you remember those throwaway, pre-digital sort of throwaway Kodak?
Sure. They used to put them at the tables of the weddings.
Spin the wheel, even have a flash. Yeah, they'd be on the tables of the wedding.
We used to do those great things at the weddings where they would put on the tables, and some of these weddings would have multiple different weddings happening at the same venue. So our game was to take those, to go to another one of the weddings and see if we can get us dancing with the bride at the other weddings on the camera from our friend's wedding.
The wedding photobomb.
Exactly.
Yes.
Before all of that. It's fantastic.
So those were so great because my lifestyle 15, 20 years ago, if you lost the thing, it didn't matter.
Right.
You were partying. It was good. It was a good camera. And now I have 2 children and a wife, and I have a D7000, and I either am in the mode of trying to capture every pixel of every second of my kid being cute, or I love being on Instagram. I'm no Miss Hatton, but
how many followers? How many followers do you have on Instagram?
A few thousand. Yeah.
Miss Hatton, how many followers do you have? How many? Miss Hatton, 275,000.
270,000 times as followed as I am, but
somebody actually saw her before going to the speaker dinner last night. She was one of those bicycle cabs and jumped out and said, "You're famous. You're famous. Can I make a photograph of you?" And that's amazing.
Happens
that doesn't happen to you?
Never happens to me. Although I did sit by the founders when they started it. And I was sort of in the dog patch in San Francisco, and I was sort of like, why are these guys taking photos of Coke cans and giggling? Like what is this thing? And I was asking them, I was working on a startup, and I was like, what are you guys doing? And they're like, we're playing with filters. It's so fun. And but they're very smart, very cool people. So I managed to get Julian on Instagram because I was one of the first people on it. And now I get, this is a double-edged sword. Now every day I get, can I have your username, which is the polite version.
What's the not polite version?
Can I have your username? And you're too old to be on Instagram. I get that. And
do you agree?
From my profile
do you agree
photo,
with that?
I'm probably older than the average. But I love it. And then the other thing you get is everyone, when they're commenting and putting in Julian, somebody else's name, they always put a space, and so @Julian. So I get 1 million comments every day that do not.
But that should increase your followers. But it's not working.
Could be the photos.
So just as a perspective, I used to shoot with a Rolleiflex, a Nikon F, and a Nikon FM, and I totally agree with you that it depends on what you're going to shoot is the main goal. The hardware is a means to an end, and we'll talk more about that now. And now I only photograph since 2003 with my camera phone, and my wearable clip, which I'm also an investor from Narrative, and some various head cam when I'm doing sports.
And I think with the iPhone, which I shoot with, it's partly because the iPhone's a great camera, and it's my primary phone. It is also because it is the fastest to get it to, in my case, Instagram, or if I'm sharing with my wife.
Is that the primary benefit of it?
Yeah, and I think someone yesterday said, photography is not just capture, it's capture, edit, share, view, and so you don't think just about the camera, you think about the camera and the sharing.
So my view is that we only capture images. We only make images, which Rebecca hates this statement that I've had forever because we created a site called Making Pictures. is to visually communicate. You see, she still hates it. To visually communicate. And that leads in from why he likes photographing the iPhone to a conversation you and I have had often about, why do people make pictures? And like you said, it's a question about what story do I want to tell? So tell us a little bit, Hans-Peter, about kind of your view on what is the ideal, or not the ideal camera. Let's choose one use case and think about traveling. What would pieces of that camera have in it? What would it enable you to do? As one or two use cases for your thoughts.
Yes, so I look at it, if you step back and you look at the human visual system, right, we've got a few really important components. It starts with, the retina, the lens, then it goes to, the cornea, and then the retina, which is, the sensor. Then you got the optical nerve, and there's a lot of processing in there, and then ultimately the brain. And the brain is where most of the interesting stuff happens. You might think you see me right now, but especially if you look at him, you have 1 degree, 1 degree field of view. So you're not seeing me. Your brain is seeing me. It remembers that you saw me, but you're actually not. And your peripheral vision, in case there's a saber-toothed tiger attacking you from the side, is very attuned to basically directing your attention and all that, to the potential threat. There we go. I saw that because there was movement.
One more time.
I saw that because you didn't catch it.
I didn't catch it.
Using an iPhone, it's a little slow. But I caught it with that thing standing back there.
Yeah, you're going to tell us about that.
Yeah. So the thing is, we have a very well-developed, in evolution it's a great thing, right? So we have a very well-developed visual system. The problem with most of the traditional cameras today is you've got the lens, you got the cornea, you got the sensor, the retina, and then dumb storage. And then to your point, you kind of have to pull the card out, stick it in. So the iPhone is much better because it actually, or this mobile phone, because the smartphone, it comes with a brain. So the starting point is just looking at the architecture of that. But then I start thinking, well, there are great scenarios, say if you're in the mountains, in a use case mountain, where you want the camera to follow you down the hill, right? Hovering a few feet above you. That's just starting to become real, right? There are other scenarios where you want a third-party view, you want some guy on the bottom catching you coming down. So in some ways, what you really want is a distributed set of eyeballs, all connected using high bandwidth connectivity to a brain, and ultimately those brains constituting a hive mind. And so I think what was interesting with the cloud and with all the sort of stuff that's happening is that we have kind of 2 brains now. It's a little bit. What was that? Was it Doctor?
You only have 2?
Doctor Who. Well, we each have 2. we have our own brain and the collective brain, right? Let's not get into neurology here, but I think that so we have and I think the camera is similar. You're going to need a brain, sort of a local brain, so local processing, local capabilities. You're going to need an eyeball or multiple eyeballs. You've got one on your lapel. You got 2 actually, one right there in your lap and another one in your pocket. I've got a couple with me today, 3 actually, and those are the eyeballs. And then I've got some compute, a little bit right here, and a bunch up in the cloud. And so it's that architecture of how it all gets sort of put together, and then the stuff that the hive mind, the real sort of the cloud brain, what it can start extracting from the images. We heard a lot about that yesterday, some really cool stuff. Additionally, if the weather wasn't quite what I'd expected and I wanted to sort of blew up the sky a little bit when I was taking that picture of the Eiffel Tower on my family trip I'd saved for years, well, why not just pull some images from the hive mind to kind of reconstruct a slightly better scene than what I actually happened to experience? Now, you might argue that that's not traditional photography, but it's what we do in Photoshop and with post-processing anyway with filters on Instagram. So that's where I think it gets really interesting, is when you combine all of those and you start looking at it as an architecture, not just what's a single camera look like.
Yeah, and I think we can take that further. I think we have some interesting questions as society. People seem to have an unquenchable thirst to save their memories. And, what is it? Blade Runner, all these moments will be lost like tears in rain. People want to keep every moment. And each moment, whether you're skiing or whether it's a portrait that you want, or requires a different viewpoint to capture it the way that you want it. So how do we If you assume that people want to be able to capture every moment, how do we set things up now that cameras are so inexpensive to essentially be able to capture everything all the time? And I think we're going there. I think that if you look at countries like the UK that have closed blanket CCTV coverage of public areas, increasingly whether or not you want to be recorded in public space, you will be recorded in public space, and the choice that we have as a society is, do we want to be always recorded, video and audio, all the time in our private space? Other people in your private space doing that will inevitably start recording you as well. So it's sort of a question that we want to ask ourselves, both from just a comfort and privacy question. So there's that part of the question, but then there's the, okay, how do you do that? How do you make sure that that you can go back and see every moment? Can you do framing, in post-processing? You can do focusing in post-processing. How much of it is just sort of grab all the photons and then work it out later?
Well, the image you showed of your satellite selfie there. If you start with that idea, and then you say, if you think about Cartier-Bresson and sort of the tradition of street photography, which is kind of my favorite genre and form.
Mine as well.
Imagine sort of the future of street photography is that you're effectively sitting in front of your computer and looking at Google Street View, and it's live streaming, and you can just go wherever you want, and you can just sort of zoom in, hone in on what you're doing. Incredibly boring.
Depends on what you're looking at.
Depends on what you're looking at, and there's actually some very interesting art.
You're looking at the wrong streets.
There's some very interesting art that's actually come out of Street View. People just sort of going through until they find something interesting. But imagine for a moment it was live streaming, right? Imagine that, and you had high quality, and at some point versions of that will happen. Maybe not ubiquitously, but it'll happen in a lot of different areas. And so. I think the whole idea of what it means to be a photographer, what it means to capture images, to your point, do you want everything to be live streamed? Why not, if you're at home, you could just talk to the camera and say, please, shut down now. You should be able to gesture to it and just say like this.
Off the record.
Off the record, exactly.
I think that's actually going to happen. I mean, that satellite selfie or others, it is happening, but the question is what cameras are going to be where, what capture device, whatever we call them, which we need to turn.
I've got a question about the satellite selfie.
Go.
You got latency issues, so do you set up at 10 a.m. I will be looking up?
Are we going to try to solve this here now?
Well, I think those are great questions, but I'm looking at it more of it will happen, and there's a ton of technology questions that have to come into effect. There was actually one done by a group that was working with...
So you faked that one?
That one was faked, yes. Sorry, you knew that, but that was a drone that did that. But I think that's going to be real. There was a group, I think an Israeli computer vision group, that actually went outside and shot a photograph of them from a satellite and planned it and set it up. And obviously it cost a lot of money.
Looking up for quite a long time.
They could have been, but I don't know. Sorry, but I think it's coming. What we also talked last night, and relating to what you guys both said, of there's images everywhere. I would love to be able to know my trip this morning to here or elsewhere that would have been more interesting. With all the security cameras I went through, they should be able to know that that's Evan's face. I should have a signal on some service.
Careful what you ask for.
Exactly. It's going to happen, and they may already have it, but they're not sharing it with me. I'd like them to share it with me. Like this.
And that's an interesting thing, right? The whole transparency thing, right? It's like, why not just live stream all that stuff?
Exactly. So if our memories, we heard earlier about capturing memories and talking about a lot of it is for capturing memories, and there's other reasons we make pictures and share. If many of my memories from my childhood, I don't really think of my memories. It's a photograph that I've seen and I've created a memory. So if there is one more picture or image per month that we get that we never captured, that would help me in the future think of a moment on stage here or outside talking to people that I wasn't capturing, I'd rather be in the moment and have another way to get that visual moment or be inspired.
Yeah, I love photography, but I would love to have the photograph without spending this great moment with squinting through a viewfinder.
The other one I've been talking about for years is a retina cam. So click. I just took a picture, Peter. Or two pictures.
You're scaring me, Evan.
Okay, so let's take it to the next step. So you got a couple cameras, and I referenced jewelry. There are many photographers, professional photographers, that frequently carry their Leica or fancy camera around. They're great cameras, and there's other brands that it's just like clothing. They might be at an event. I used to go to photography events. 2,000 great professional photojournalists. There was no news. You know, they're news photographers, and they wanted to have their camera to make a picture that's not news, but they were kind of always carrying around and trying to one-up each other. It's not everybody. That's why I referenced the jewelry. But tell us what camera you have here and what camera you have there.
So do you have the big iPhone or the little iPhone?
The little one, yeah. I'm not an Eagle guy, sorry. Hence, once again, yeah.
Mine's small too. So, look,
it's not the size.
So I think, and this is, you know, he refers to this as jewelry. I think there are versions of this I'm sure you can get with diamonds.
Yeah.
And so
is
that
one that one has them?
No. But I think, you know, I'll take a little bit of issue with the this is a tool.
Yes.
Right? And it's a tool for capturing images and telling stories. And I think that from a storytelling perspective, from a tool perspective, as a craftsman or in a hobbyist or whatever you are, you carry your tool with you. What I happen to like about this particular tool is because it's a rangefinder camera, it stops me. When I take a picture with this camera, I have to think and compose differently than when I take a picture with other types of cameras. I can also I can use this tool in ways that I can't use other tools.
Do you take pictures or make pictures?
Well, I take them and then I make them. So I will take a picture and I will oftentimes, you know, if I were to take a picture of all you now here, I'm not sure I'm going to make a picture of this, but I will take one. So I just, you know, I'll record an image right here, and then I'll use Lightroom and I'll use, you know, other means.
So, but Cartier-Bresson would used to make pictures in the camera more.
He used to frame it, and there's a whole school of thought, which, you know, sort of probably a different panel, but there's a whole school of thought around, you know, what you capture is what you do. But whether you capture it by framing it right here, or whether you frame it later in Lightroom, honestly, I don't see the difference.
Okay.
But that's a philosophical debate. But so the point is, I think we can, you know, the thing behind me is a 360 camera.
It's
a very cool little
video
design.
or
it's
stills?
Video, right now it's time-lapsing.
Is that what you're controlling on your phone?
So you control it from your iPhone, and it just time-lapses. I should have put it up there because then it would have gotten us and you all in one.
So let's do that. Let's move it.
It's actually my best angle back there.
Is
so,
it?
Yeah,
move it. Hans Peter, put it
behind me, actually.
Put it somewhere while you keep talking.
I think the, you know,
I don't know what that
sort
means.
of the camera, sort of the perfect camera, you know, I think the connected camera, which shares very rapidly and does as much as you can of all the things you want to do, even on the phone. I think that's going to be my go-to camera. I think the one situation where I want a camera for
a selfie stick,
camera for portraits. And in low light conditions that sucks in as much light as possible and enables me to never use the flash, because that is so off-putting to people in most situations. You know, just a big lens and sucking in as much light as possible. That's the one camera I think I would have, other than the, if money were no object, other than the.
It's of no object, right? Google.
Sure.
So I totally agree. Let's talk a little bit, about the actual experience of the visual content. We've got stills, we've got video, we've got a presentation yesterday by Fusion, more interactive, almost 3D or 3D. We've got VR, AR. There's all kinds of different experiences, and it's about capturing a visual story and communicating it, right? So, I mean, what video cameras, how much video capturing do you do on a percentage basis from still or video? Do you do much?
Very small.
Okay.
I actually consider videos and stills to be a very technology-limited artificial distinction.
Okay.
Right? It's what is a video? You know, it used to be called motion pictures. Why? Because, you know, you took a bunch of frames of film and recorded them, and then you played them back, and lo and behold, stuff moved. Right? So, you know, I think the camera I would like to see is a camera where I just click, I hold the button, I wait for a little bit, I release, and then at some point later I can go back and say, well, that was the perfect moment. That was the image. That was the decisive moment. So I think that distinction between still and on the contrary, why shouldn't I just be able to walk up to an image and say, wow, that's really cool, give me context, which could be sound, it could be movement, it could be location, and it could be a whole host of other things that I want to sort of double click on the image and go into it and learn more, or I just want to stand back from it and enjoy, the beauty of it and the expressiveness of the image itself.
So hang on, Julian, 1 second. So questions, we've got 8 minutes left or so, but I look forward to great questions from the audience. So we have, who's running the mic since I'm up here? Maybe Rebecca could do that? Or somebody else?
So, I take a lot of video because I have 2.5-year-old and a 4.5-year-old, and boy, are they cute in video, right? So at least I think so. So I shoot a lot of video. I think the other part of that is there are some interesting new formats, so the hyperlapse, whether it be Instagram or Microsoft, enables you to do some fun things and get some fun effects with motion and moving through spaces and getting an overview of an area, and it's just a different feel to it, and it can be beautiful. So I enjoy that, and there's a lot of different new apps playing with motion and effects and
animations or animated GIFs or there's a bunch of those. So on that note, there's a conversation again. It's still that it's not let's not talk about which use cases, but in general, do we think that most people would rather see a 3D image than a 2D image? If they could, forget the easy to capture and all that kind of stuff. If there was a 3D gram rather than Instagram, would people want more of that, do you think? Or is it just a segment of time?
Isn't that like asking, would they rather listen to music or watch the music video? Would they rather listen to radio or watch television?
Yeah, so what do you think the answer is?
Yes.
Okay.
So I
agree.
I think I think you'll have beautiful art on the wall, and it'll be still images. Maybe eventually you'll be able to walk up and touch them and do things with them and learn more. I think we'll see. I think the still image, the what I call sort of the invisible moments, the moments you never see but they're actually there in plain sight and that you can capture. I think invisible moments are unbelievable. It's a beautiful way to capture life. I also think that kids can be really cute. And if it's other people's kids, you can only watch so much cute kid video.
Did you put that filter on Facebook where you can not see your
exactly
friends' kids?
pets and kids?
Yeah.
But I think that 10 years from now they'll be even cuter, right? So that ability to archive it and remember it is critical.
3D is interesting because 3D TV and film has been underwhelming.
Yeah.
And I think the brain somehow turns everything into 2D, right?
So that's my question. So
after the beginning of the 3D film, they always put the good stuff at the start, and the thing comes out of the screen, and everyone's, whoa! And then 15 minutes in, you're like, am I watching 3D or not? I don't really know. It looks maybe a bit more 3D. I think 3D is important when you can interact with it. So when you can move into it, you can see a different perspective. You can move in space and time, and sport on a 3D TV when you can change the angle. That becomes interesting, but just a 3D representation where you're not interacting with it, I don't think has done much.
Well, what's the potential? Where's it going to go? So we had Steve from HoloLens, and
so VR or AR, when you're able to interact with with the visuals in time and space, and then also have a whole bunch of augmented information and be able to interact with things. That becomes really interesting.
Okay. Any questions in the audience right there? Myron.
So what about...
Stand up, Myron. Come on.
So what about, speaking of, capturing more of the visible, Lytro did this whole light field thing. And, now you can unfortunately buy their cameras for $79 on Woot. And that doesn't seem to have taken off. So any thoughts on where that fits in the spectrum of because it gives you a lot of capabilities?
I think it's a good question. I think Lytro is a feature. It's not a.
I agree.
It's the ability to focus can be done a bunch of ways, and one of them could be post facto. In fact, for most consumers, I think just a little bit of blur, with a center and a little bit of computational, sort of low pass filtering applied to the rest of the image gives you pretty much the same effect, a sense of a depth of field. So it's a very expensive and complicated way with no infrastructure support. So it doesn't work in Lightroom, it doesn't work in Photoshop, it doesn't work in all the tools people use. So you can use their tools to do a low resolution image to do blur. So it's a very cool feature if it could be built in at the infrastructure level, but it's not a movement, it's not a new kind of exciting format in my view. But just one more small point there, which is what they're demonstrating is that computation can change the way we manage images, and Photoshop has been demonstrating that for decades. So, but I think that part, right, that the fact that computation is changing the way we manage and interact with, record, capture, replay images, that's the trend we should be looking at.
Yeah, you got to remember, people who actually, know what a Leica is and care about it, we're a tiny minority of people. If you look at visual images looked at by people in the world, it used to be driven much more by a small concentration of professional photographers who put all the images in the magazines that everyone would look at. Now people spend much more time looking at their own camera roll, their Facebook friends' photos, Instagram, than they do looking at Cartier-Bresson, Magnum photographers. So increasingly, that concentration of image makers is becoming less relevant. And so when you think about which cameras and you think about what effects are required, not that many people want to change the focus of their photo. That's the problem with Litro. It's a niche activity. Most people just want the photo to be in focus for whatever they're taking to be in focus, and maybe they want a little blur. That's it.
Any other questions from the audience?
Yeah, I've got one here.
Great.
Andrew, so we're talking a lot about where things are going, so on and so forth. My question is, do you still put together physical photo albums?
I do not.
I do books occasionally. I'll do, but probably much less than prior generations did, and probably the next generations in turn even less so. But books are I think a really powerful expression.
We've done baby photo books for the first years of our kids' lives, and we do a calendar for the relatives.
So even more so, why? So is it for you, or is it for the relatives, or is it for something? Is it like we did for the summit? It lets a moment in time continue. So why? Get kind of the core.
For the kids, we're holding on to the fact that we had a baby book, and we think therefore to be good parents, we have to give them a baby book, right? So, but for the calendar, it's a nice way to have something on the wall,
right?
That is functional as well as fun.
So the goal, the goal, just 1 second, the goal of that is, I think, phenomenal. It's memories, and I had just a couple weeks ago with my family looking at my parents' wedding album, my bar mitzvah, my sister's bat mitzvah. It's a phenomenal sharing visual experience. We probably do that once every, unfortunately, 10 years. If, a couple of those photographs I've never seen before, which was fantastic. But what I did was I photographed them, and I have them on my phone, and now I share them with a lot of people. They're both valuable, but to your point, my gut is I want a way to visually communicate to many people wherever I am and whenever I am, whether or not it's on the phone or a server.
Yeah, again, it gets back a little bit to use cases, right?
Right.
These are memories, and they're stories, and you have different ways to communicate and tell memories or stories, and I think that we talked yesterday. There was a conversation about maps. And I think part of what we're talking about is putting our life on the map, right, in different ways.
Sure.
And that includes actually literally maps. Where was I? What was I doing? But it also includes sort of the images and the history of my life. So what I want to see is like a full-on service that lets me put my life on the map and go back and relive it and revisit it later.
I agree. I think that makes a lot of sense. Where's the question over here? Samson.
Yeah. Depth. Do you think that 2D image plus depth might be an interesting camera? It's something the community could certainly build.
Yeah, depth maps are going to be critical, right? You're going to have stereoscopic imaging. There's Pelican Images with their array cameras. Apple just made the acquisition in space. So depth is going to be an important part, and allows you to do sort of poor man's focus pull, right? Of poor man's post-processing to get the focus, the same effect as Litro, but a little cheaper.
And we've talked a lot about consumer photography. There's obviously lots and lots of applications of depth for business and industrial applications. And I think because cameras have got so cheap, I think industrial applications of things we haven't talked about are going to be massive. So, whether it's, using vision to recognize, parts, or whether it's, monitoring processes, or whether it's, testing, visually checking assemblies, there's going to be a ton of vision driving industrial processes.
Okay, fantastic. So we are out of time, but what I'd love from both of you, because you're very successful serial entrepreneurs, the ups and downs, as we had some interesting conversations yesterday about transparency and building businesses. In one sentence, what would be your advice to entrepreneurs or people that want to build a business or building one?
It's as much work to do something small as to do something big. So find something that's going to make a dent in the universe that you love, and do it with people you love.
Great.
That was good.
You have to do another one. You can't take his.
It's about the commitment. Don't worry too much about the idea. It's going to evolve and change. Make the commitment and go.
Fantastic, guys. Thank you very much for this conversation. Let's give them a round of applause, guys.